There is a silent force that shapes confidence, identity, and direction long before words can explain it. It is not measured by wealth, titles, or perfection. It is measured by presence, guidance, and the power to affirm. This force is what we call the father factor. The father factor is not just about biology, it is about influence. A father may be present in the home, yet absent in the heart, or absent in the home, yet present through wisdom, discipline, and example. What matters most is not simply being there, but showing up with intention. When a father speaks life, identity begins to form. When a father listens, value is reinforced. When a father leads with integrity, the next generation learns how to stand. Many people spend their lives trying to fill gaps created by words they never heard or hugs they never received. Approval becomes a hunger, validation becomes a chase. Some overachieve to prove worth, others withdraw to avoid rejection. The father factor explains why wounds can last for decades and why healing must begin at the root. What was missing in the foundation often shows up in the future as insecurity, anger, or fear of failure. But the story does not end with absence or imperfection. The father factor also reveals the power of restoration. A healthy voice can replace a broken echo. A guiding presence can interrupt generational cycles. You may not be able to rewrite your past, but you can redefine your future. Healing begins when you recognize that you are not disqualified because of what you lacked. You are empowered by what you choose to become. True fathering is about covering, correcting, and confirming. Covering means providing safety emotionally and spiritually. Correcting means offering discipline that shapes character, not punishment that produces fear. Confirming means speaking identity, reminding someone who they are, even when they forget it themselves. Everyone needs someone who can say, this is who you are, and this is where you're going. The father factor also challenges leaders, mentors, and role models. Influence carries responsibility. People are watching how you handle pressure, failure, and success. Your consistency teaches more than your speeches. Your integrity preaches louder than your instruction. When guidance is given with love and boundaries are set with wisdom, growth becomes inevitable. For those who feel the weight of a missing or flawed father figure, hear this clearly: lack does not define destiny. You are not bound to repeat what hurt you. You can become what you needed. Strength is not found in denial, but in awareness and transformation. When you choose growth over bitterness, you break cycles that once seemed permanent. The father factor ultimately calls us to maturity. It asks us to rise above excuses, to heal instead of hiding, and to lead with purpose. Whether you are raising children, mentoring others, or rebuilding yourself, your influence matters. The seeds you plant today will grow into tomorrow's legacy. Your past may explain you, but it does not have to imprison you. The father factor reminds us that identity can be restored, purpose can be awakened, and generations can be changed. Starting now, presence shapes identity in ways that are often invisible but deeply permanent. Long before a person understands language, rules, or expectations, they are already absorbing messages about who they are and what they are worth. Presence is not merely physical proximity. It is emotional availability, consistency, and intentional engagement. A guiding presence becomes a mirror in which identity is first reflected. When that mirror is clear, a person learns to recognize themselves with confidence. When it is distorted or missing, confusion and insecurity take root. Identity is formed through repetition. The tone of a voice, the patience behind correction, The warmth or coldness in everyday interactions all send messages that settle quietly into the soul. A consistent presence says, "You matter, you are seen, you belong." Over time, these messages shape how a person speaks to themselves internally. They influence the risks someone is willing to take, the standards they set for their own life, and the way they interpret failure. Presence creates a framework for self-understanding long before conscious choices are made. When presence is strong, discipline does not feel like rejection. Correction is understood as care, not control. Boundaries feel protective rather than restrictive. A present guide helps a person distinguish between behavior and identity, teaching them that mistakes do not define who they are. This distinction is critical because many people grow up believing that failure equals worthlessness. Presence interrupts that lie by reinforcing the truth that value is constant even when performance is flawed. Absence, on the other hand, creates unanswered questions. When affirmation is missing, people often assume the worst about themselves. Silence becomes interpreted as disapproval. Distance is mistaken for rejection. Over time, the mind fills in the gaps with self-blame, creating narratives that may not be true but feel real. This is why absence can echo louder than words. It leaves room for imagination. And imagination without guidance often turns cruel. The impact of presence extends far beyond childhood. Adults who grew up with consistent guidance often carry an internal sense of stability. They are more likely to trust themselves, form healthy relationships, and navigate conflict without losing their sense of self. They do not require constant validation because their identity was reinforced early and often, even in moments of uncertainty. They have an inner voice that steadies them, reminding them of who they are. For those who lacked presence, identity often becomes something to be earned rather than something to be embraced. Achievement replaces affirmation. Success becomes a substitute for acceptance. Many become high performers not out of passion, but out of a desire to prove worth. Others shrink, fearing exposure or rejection. Both responses are attempts to answer the same internal question, "Oh, am I enough?" Presence answers that question early, while absence leaves it unanswered for years. Yet presence is not about perfection. It is about reliability. Showing up consistently, even with flaws, teaches resilience. Admitting mistakes while remaining engaged models accountability. Presence allows room for growth on both sides. It communicates that relationship is stronger than failure and connection is more valuable than control. This kind of presence builds trust, and trust becomes the soil where identity grows strong. Presence also teaches how to interpret the world. Through engagement, values are transferred. Integrity, empathy, patience, and courage are not learned through lectures alone. They are absorbed through observation. When someone sees calm in chaos, honesty in difficulty, and strength in humility, those qualities become part of their internal blueprint. Presence turns abstract values into lived examples. The absence of presence often forces people to learn identity from external sources. Culture, peers, success, and approval step in to fill the void. These sources are unstable and conditional, leading to fragile self-worth. When identity is built on applause, it collapses in silence. Presence provides a stable reference point that does not change with circumstances. Healing begins when presence is introduced. Even later in life, a mentor, leader, or supportive figure can help reframe identity by offering consistent affirmation and guidance. Over time, new patterns replace old narratives. The inner voice becomes kinder. Confidence grows not from achievement, but from understanding value. Presence has the power to restore what absence tried to erase. Ultimately, presence shapes identity because it answers the deepest human need to be known and accepted. When someone feels seen without having to perform, identity becomes secure. From that security flows courage, purpose, and the freedom to become. Presence does not just influence who someone is, it gives them permission to fully be who they were meant to become. Healing breaks generational cycles by confronting what has been normalized, silenced, or ignored for years. Many patterns of pain do not begin with one person. They are passed down quietly through behaviors, reactions, and unspoken expectations. What one generation tolerates, the next one inherits. Without healing, people often repeat what hurt them, not because they want to, but because pain that is unexamined becomes pain that is transferred. Generational cycles are powerful because they feel familiar. Dysfunction, when repeated long enough, begins to feel normal. Harsh words sound like discipline. Emotional distance looks like strength. Silence is mistaken for peace. When someone grows up surrounded by these patterns, they absorb them as truth. Healing starts with awareness. The moment a person realizes that what they experienced may explain their behavior, but it does not excuse it. Awareness is the first interruption in a long-running cycle. Unhealed wounds often surface as overreactions. A small disagreement triggers disproportionate anger. Minor criticism feels like a personal attack. These responses are rarely about the present moment. They are echoes of unresolved pain. Healing requires the courage to trace reactions back to their source and name them honestly. When pain is identified, it loses its power to operate unconsciously. What is named can be addressed. What is ignored continues to control. Breaking cycles also requires responsibility. It is easier to blame the past than to confront the present. Many people understand why they behave the way they do, but stop short of changing it. Healing demands more than insight. It demands action. It asks difficult questions. Why do I avoid intimacy? Why do I sabotage peace? Why do I repeat the very behaviors I resented? These questions are uncomfortable, but they open the door to transformation. Forgiveness plays a critical role in healing generational pain. Forgiveness does not deny harm or excuse behavior. It releases the grip of resentment. Holding on to bitterness often feels like protection, but it actually keeps wounds open. When forgiveness is withheld, the past remains active in the present. Healing allows a person to acknowledge what was wrong without allowing it to define what comes next. Healing also redefines strength. Many cycles continue because vulnerability was never modeled. Emotions were suppressed, not processed. Tears were seen as weakness, not release. Healing introduces a new definition of strength, one that includes honesty, self-reflection, and emotional maturity. When someone learns to express feelings without fear, they model a healthier way of living for those who follow them. The impact of healing extends beyond the individual. When one person chooses growth, it shifts the environment around them. Relationships change, communication improves, boundaries become clearer. Children, friends, and those being led experience a different atmosphere, one where safety replaces fear and understanding replaces control. Healing transforms leadership because it removes the need to dominate or prove worth. Generational cycles often survive because they are protected by silence. Families avoid difficult conversations to maintain a false sense of harmony. Healing breaks that silence with truth. Honest dialogue creates clarity and prevents repetition. When pain is acknowledged openly, it loses its ability to hide and multiply. Truth becomes the foundation for healthier patterns. Healing also requires patience. Cycles formed over decades do not dissolve overnight. Progress may be slow and nonlinear. There will be moments of regression, frustration, and doubt. Healing is not about perfection, it is about persistence. Each intentional choice weakens the old pattern and strengthens a new one. Consistency over time reshapes identity and behavior. One of the most powerful outcomes of healing is freedom from fear. Many generational cycles are rooted in fear, fear of abandonment, failure, or vulnerability. Healing addresses fear at its core, replacing it with security and self-awareness. When fear no longer drives decisions, people respond instead of react. They choose rather than repeat. Ultimately, healing breaks generational cycles by changing the story that gets passed down. Instead of pain becoming the inheritance, wisdom takes its place. Instead of survival becoming the goal, wholeness becomes the standard. When one person commits to healing, they do more than improve their own life. They alter the trajectory of generations to come. Influence is a responsibility long before it is a privilege, because every position of authority carries the power to shape lives in ways that may never be fully seen or acknowledged. Whether someone realizes it or not, people are always watching how leaders respond under pressure, how they treat others when no reward is attached, and how they carry themselves when the spotlight fades. Influence is not limited to titles or formal roles. It exists wherever example exists. The weight of influence lies in the fact that behavior teaches constantly, even in silence. Every action sends a message. Consistency builds credibility, while contradiction breeds confusion. When words and actions align, trust is formed. When they do not, even the most eloquent instruction loses its power. People learn more from what is practiced than from what is preached. This is why influence must be handled with care. A careless response can discourage growth, while a thoughtful one can inspire courage. Influence magnifies impact, meaning both wisdom and recklessness travel further than intended. True responsibility begins with self-awareness. Those who influence others must first understand their own motives, wounds, and tendencies. Unresolved issues often leak into leadership, turning guidance into control or correction into criticism. When influence is driven by insecurity, it seeks validation. When it is driven by ego, it seeks dominance. Responsibility calls for humility, the willingness to grow privately so others can thrive publicly. Leadership that refuses self-examination eventually becomes harmful, even if intentions were once good. Influence also requires emotional maturity. People in positions of impact must learn to regulate their reactions, especially in moments of stress or disappointment. Emotional outbursts, silence, or passive aggression can create environments of fear rather than growth. Responsible influence creates safety. It allows people to ask questions, make mistakes, and learn without feeling diminished. Safety does not remove accountability, it strengthens it. When people feel secure, they are more open to correction and more committed to improvement. Correction itself is a defining test of responsible influence. Discipline can either shape character or damage confidence, depending on how it is delivered. Responsible influence corrects behavior without attacking identity. It separates what someone did from who they are. This distinction protects dignity while encouraging growth. When influence becomes demeaning, it produces compliance at best, not transformation. Responsibility demands that correction be rooted in care, not frustration. Another aspect of responsibility is recognizing the power of words. Words spoken by influential figures often carry more weight than intended. A casual remark can linger for years. A harsh label can become a lifelong limitation. Responsible influence chooses language carefully, understanding that affirmation can unlock potential, while criticism, when careless, can shut it down. Speaking life is not about flattery, it is about clarity and truth delivered with respect. Influence also extends to what is tolerated. What leaders ignore becomes acceptable. What they excuse becomes repeated. Responsibility means addressing issues early, not allowing them to grow unchecked. Avoidance may feel peaceful in the moment, but it often leads to deeper problems later. Responsible influence confronts with courage and consistency, setting standards that protect the health of the whole community. Serving others is at the heart of responsible influence. True leaders do not use people to build platforms. They use platforms to build people. They understand that influence is borrowed, not owned. It is entrusted for a season and must be stewarded wisely. This perspective keeps pride in check and purpose clear. Responsibility reminds leaders success is not measured by how many follow, but by how many are strengthened. Influence also carries a generational dimension. The values modeled today shape the culture of tomorrow. Children, students, and followers absorb not only what is taught, but what is lived. Integrity passed down becomes legacy. Hypocrisy passed down becomes confusion. Responsible influence thinks beyond the moment, considering the long-term impact of present decisions. Ultimately, influence is a responsibility because it shapes identity, culture, and destiny. It calls for integrity, patience, and courage. When handled with care, influence becomes a force for growth, healing, and empowerment. When handled recklessly, it leaves wounds that take years to heal. Responsibility ensures that influence does not merely command attention, but earns trust and leaves people better than it found them. Thank you for watching